Abysmal balance issues have plagued set 9, leading to its downfall from the most popular set ever to one of the least. Here we can see that in the same number of patches, set 9 had more than double the number of hotfixes than set 8. If we compare every set, we can see that set 9 is one of the worst balanced sets of all time, and that's while set 9 still has another month left on live servers. And it gets worse when you consider that set 9 has the same number of hotfixes as both set 5 and 6, which each had an entire 2 months less of development. Not to mention set 9's mid-set, which brought a plethora of issues that just rendered the set frankly unplayable even 5 months after the initial release of the set. This raises huge concerns for sets 10 and onward, as they only have a lifespan of 4 months, an entire 2 months fewer than set 9. And questions that have cropped up is that if set 9 is still unbalanced after 5 months, how long will it take for set 10 to be balanced, if at all? Will history repeat itself in set 10, and will we see numerous hotfixes that wildly change the game state every week? What is causing these balance issues to be so rampant in set 9? And what do Riot need to do to prevent this from happening again? Before we get into that, remember to subscribe. So what's causing these balance issues in set 9? Here we can see that even though set 8 and set 9 have the same time in development, set 9 has almost double the number of hotfixes. And this issue stems from the number of unique mechanics in set 9, that being augments, portals and legends, all of which resonate with each other and drastically influence the game state and certain playstyles. Set 8 only had hero augments, which were just an extension to the ordinary augment system. Another way of identifying this is by looking at the most hotfix sets, or conversely the least balanced sets, and those are sets 5, 6 and now 9. Now these sets are arguably the most ambitious sets ever, with introductions of huge mechanics and systems that completely overhaul the game. Set 5 brought a new item system with shadow and later radiant items, set 6 brought augments which became an evergreen mechanic, and set 9 brought legends and portals on top of augments. And this explains the 2-month difference with time and development between these sets, as sets 5 and 6 only had one unique set mechanic, whereas 9 has tripled that at 3. Of course, it's great that Riot are being more and more ambitious with TFT, but to me, this tells me that Riot aren't polishing these sets enough before they come out. Riot are focusing too much on the introduction of extra mechanics and not enough on the polish of said mechanics. This is particularly true for set 9, wherein legends were a huge source of balance issues due to how warping they could be, especially when used to abuse whatever was clearly overpowered. And this meant that the existence of legends exacerbated set 9's balance issues and made them far more apparent. If you compare this to set 8, even if there were clearly overpowered hero augments, players still needed RNG to get the specific hero augment to appear amongst all the other augments for different units. Anyway, this interlocked and intricate bond between these layered mechanics is inherently problematic, as even minute changes can have a domino effect and cause large balance swings. These large balance swings, in turn, need larger patches to address, which of course causes another balance swing. This balance thrashing makes it impossible for players to keep up with the game, as the meta was upheaved almost every week due to the hotfixes. But there's only so much the balance team can do, as it's incredibly difficult to balance fundamentally problematic mechanics like legends without reworking them, which is beyond the scope of the balance team. Reworks like this are just too volatile partway through a set, as they can disrupt the overall set balance, which takes a lot of time to settle. However, these chaotic reworks are a consequence of a much larger issue, which is the difference in balance philosophies between designers. If you've ever watched Mortdog's patch postmortems or his rundowns with Kent, then you know that they commonly have differing perspectives on the set balance, which in turn leads them to have vastly different approaches to amending that. So fundamentally, even though the structure of the game may be similar, the feel, rules and direction are not. Now, this is more of an issue when you're comparing different sets, but I felt that difference in this set, where there was almost an obsession with making low-cost units really strong carries in the late game, and making tanks also double as damage carries. This is particularly true for Cho'Gath and Nasus, where Cho'Gath was buffed repeatedly until he became oppressive, and Nasus took this weird direction where his tankiness was substantially nerfed to increase his damage. But I digress. The main points here is that set 9 is the most complex TFT set to date, and that caused an unstable game state and numerous balance issues. These issues were exacerbated by legends and portals, thus responded to through larger patches, which in turn caused balance thrashing. And these issues became even more frequent after the launch of set 9's midset. And that leads into the next question. Is the midset to blame for set 9's balance issues? Well, partially, but not completely. The predominant issue with midsets is that they have, at most, 3 months to be fully built, whereas initial sets had in the regions of 8 to 10 months. These midsets habitually unraveled the original set, included some banal additions, and then regurgitated the set into a significantly worse state, which was usually the best they could do in what little time they had. Midsets can never be nearly as well crafted, balanced, and polished as the initial set, as they only have a fraction of the time in development. And this means that midsets throw the prior work on the original set out the window and subsequently spend months after that trying to recover. For example, the launch of Horizon Bound was a catastrophe due to the absurdity of bilge water that would completely nuke everything and anything in its way, even if all the bilge rat units were just 1-star. But balance isn't the only gargantuan problem. The other issue was a fundamental flaw with the nature of midsets, and that is that they're just so bloody boring. Midsets don't change how you play certain units around the same traits, give them the same items, and take the same damn augments. Although I will admit that this midset was slightly different due to the amazing item reworks which I covered in this video. However, these reworks brought in another frustration point, which were Mordekaiser and Neela and their egregious abuse of the reworked RFC. Anyway, there was little learning and discoverability with Horizon Bound. As with many midsets, players could use their pre-existing familiarity with the set and abuse the unbalanced units, traits, items, and augments, and this resulted in a bland and mundane experience for many players. Ultimately, midsets are intended to improve the overall set, but that has scarcely happened in TFT's entire history due to how Herculean a task that is in just 3 months. Over the years, we have seen how usually these midsets change each set for the worse. But why aren't midsets completely to blame for these balance issues? Well, that's because there were balance issues before the midsets even launched. And these issues occurred due to meta shifts, bugs, and broken interactions being discovered after the patch was already locked in and ready to ship. Hence, subsequent hotfixes were necessary to address and rectify these issues that the shipped patch did not. Riot call this the localization lock, and these patches are usually set in stone several days prior to the actual release date, so Riot can prepare in-game text and the patch notes in different languages for users across the world. This means that the 2-week patch cycle you're used to has a slightly different cadence for Riot, as they're finalizing the patch likely the week prior to its shipping. Now, this cadence has already shown to be problematic in this set, where due to the localization process, issues arise during a patch but remain unaddressed into the subsequent patch. This is where TFT's balance issues derive from, as this cadence greatly delays any and all reactions and changes the dev team may have by several days. This cadence will become a much larger issue when faster responses are necessary, especially with sets 10 and onwards having a substantially shorter time on the live servers. So does this mean that set 10 will have worse balance? Well, yes, it does. If Riot does not learn from their mistakes, then the balance of set 10 is a huge concern, especially with set 10 being the most innovative set ever. This image alludes to set 10 having a higher complexity than sets 5, 6, and 9, which suffered many issues due to that complexity. So with a more complicated set and Riot's slow reactions, this set may be incredibly prone to balance thrashing, especially with a shorter lifespan. Of course, Riot could avoid many problems by never reworking mechanics, traits, or units during sets 10 and onwards. However, a larger problem this causes is that if there is a categorical flaw in the set with one of these systems, it may be unaddressed for the entirety of the set. For example, Noxus was flawed during the entire first half of set 9, and its strict structure did not support more than a couple of comps. And this was the same case in set 7, where the inability of playing dragons together was incredibly restrictive and inflexible. These traits were not reworked until their respective mid-sets, after which they finally became more flexible and playable. While the removal of mid-sets will prevent huge disruptions to the game balance, their departure will take a reliable opportunity to rework problematic or flawed systems. The reworks will become much more difficult due to the absence of mid-sets and how these reworks cause upheavals in balance. But all of these problems can be avoided through something trivial, and that is adequate testing before sets are released or before reworks go live. And that leads me to the final but most important part of this video, and that's a request to Riot. Riot, please can you polish these sets properly before you release them? The vast majority of problems stem from how unbalanced the initial set launch is, which in turn means that successive patches need to be larger to address many more issues. These patches do eventually become smaller and smaller, and by the end of the set, the game state is actually pretty good. But isn't that far too late for a set to be balanced? By that point, the community's trust in the team will tank, and far more people will have already abandoned that set of TFT altogether. And you need to avoid increasing the patch frequency, hotfixes or not, as otherwise players are playing a game that is changing much faster than they can keep up with, which just leaves them frustrated and confused. Riot, you need to either deliver a well-constructed set on release, or you need a good testing system in place so you can catch and fix issues before they make it to the live servers. You already have the PvE, so use it! Right now, it looks like it doesn't really serve a purpose because balance issues and bugs on PvE still make it through to live servers. And with sets 10 and beyond having an entire 2 months more in development than any set before it, I hope you spend this time polishing the set rather than adding new mechanics, as that leads to an infinitely better player experience. And look, I'm not saying that future sets shouldn't be complex so you can easily balance it. Future sets can be far more complex. Right, you just need to meet that complexity with equivalent scrutiny to ensure a great delivery to players. But I will continue to have faith, as Set 10's development concluded just shy of 3 weeks prior to its PvE release. And Mortdog has already confirmed that there will be changes to the leveling system, and this should hopefully address the cringe that is the level 7 lottery. However, despite Set 9 being the most popular TFT set in history, the stark contrast in popularity between the mid-set and Set 9 was unprecedented, mostly due to its sheer banality and the numerous balance issues. Horizon Bound also perfectly demonstrated why mid-sets are so dreadful and justified their dismissal. I'm not sure if I should admit this, but I for one have only played a single TFT game in over a month, which is something I've not done since 2021. And there's just no reason to. Balance in particular is my #1 frustration point with TFT, and other games like Baldur's Gate are just infinitely more entertaining right now. It's a shame to say this, but Set 9 has really overstayed its welcome. And I'll end the video on that note. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.